In the far corner of the galaxy, away from all known star maps, humanity was hiding. 200 years ago, after the Great Galactic War, Earth became silent. All human colonies shut down their signals. No one knew what happened. The alien empires thought humanity was gone, destroyed or dead. But the truth was very different. Humanity had not died. It had disappeared on purpose. After the war, human leaders saw the truth. The galaxy was full of danger. Aliens feared humans, but they also hated them. Humanity had been too fast, too bold, too strong. So the leaders made a final plan, a silent one. The survivors gathered. They left Earth and all known space. In hidden star systems with no names, they started building again. They used black steel and deep space tech. No signals, no broadcasts, nothing that could be traced. They created something new, the Shadow Empire. It was not large at first, just a few ships, a few cities, but they had vision and time. Every year the Shadow Empire grew. Hidden mines dug out rare metals. Silent factories built massive warships with dark armor and cloaking tech. Scientists worked underground, creating weapons no alien had ever seen. Children were raised to know one rule: stay hidden, grow strong. No one in the galaxy knew what was happening. Alien spies searched old human sectors but found only ruins, so they believed what they wanted to believe, that humans were finished. They were wrong. One of the secret colonies, called Nero Prime, had grown into a planet-sized fortress. It had 10 million people and was guarded by a full fleet. From there, the Central Command watched the galaxy. They listened. They tracked alien movements. They waited. Then, something changed. One day, a strange signal entered human space. It was weak but not natural. It didn't match any known human or alien language. It kept repeating a strange code. "We see you." The Shadow Empire's top generals were alarmed. How could anyone know they were there? No signals had ever left the system. No traitors, no escapees. They sent out scout ship Echo 9 to follow the signal's path. It was a fast, silent ship. The pilot was AI enhanced. The ship had dark armor and no heat trace. It vanished into deep space. Hours passed, then a day, then 3. No reply. Echo 9 was gone. Panic spread through Nero Prime. The council met in secret. Was it an accident, a trap, or had someone finally found them? General Kale, a calm but feared leader, spoke first. "If they found one signal path, they can find others. We must prepare." But prepare for what? For 200 years, humanity had hidden in the dark. They never started a fight. They only watched. But now the silence was broken, and they didn't know by whom. Then came the second signal. This time it wasn't a code, it was a voice. Cold, non-human, clear. "You hid well, humans, but the stars remember you." Then the signal vanished. General Kale ordered DEFCON level black, the highest emergency level of the Shadow Empire. All ships were moved into attack positions. All citizens were ordered into shelters. The Empire had been found. Or worse, it was being hunted. But by who? And why now? Across the dark systems, people whispered the old stories. Stories about how humans once defeated stronger empires. Stories about the day Earth made alien kings bow. Maybe the galaxy had remembered. Maybe someone wanted revenge. One thing was clear. The Shadow Empire had to choose. Run again, or rise. In the silence of deep space, under the black stars, the countdown had started. The age of hiding might be over, and humanity was ready. Hours passed since the mysterious message was received, and the tension on Nero Prime was palpable. The council had moved into the deepest chambers of their underground fortresses, discussing in hushed voices. Everyone knew that the Shadow Empire's existence was now at risk. No one had ever dared to break their silence. But now, something had found them. General Kale was not one to panic. He had led countless battles in his youth, though the galaxy had never seen such an enemy. An enemy who knew their secrets, knew where they were. But the biggest question remained: who were they? And why now? As the council deliberated, scouts and intelligence officers scrambled to learn anything they could. No one had a clear answer. The signals were unlike anything they'd encountered before. There were no ships, no fleets, just a message that had crossed through the stars with chilling precision. Meanwhile, on the surface of Nero Prime, people went about their business, unaware that their entire existence was about to change forever. The citizens of the Shadow Empire had always been raised with the belief that they were safe, that their secret was untouchable. But that security was crumbling. They could feel it in the air. Then, as if the galaxy itself was watching, another signal arrived. This time it wasn't just words, it was a warning. A strange pattern of energy, sent through the stars at a frequency that only human tech could understand. It was an unmistakable message to the highest authorities. Someone had found them. Not only that, but they were coming, closer. The Shadow Empire's fleet commander, Admiral Vireo, stood on the bridge of the Nightfall, one of the most advanced warships humanity had ever built. He stared out into the abyss of space, trying to make sense of what was happening. The stars, once a peaceful backdrop, now felt more like a vast prison, closing in around them. Vireo turned to his officers. "Increase stealth protocols. I don't want anything tracing us. Prepare all ships to move out. We're not sitting still for this." There was no choice. They had to move, to hide once again, this time, further into the unknown. They had lived in the shadows for so long, always watching, always waiting, but never acting. Now, they could not wait any longer. The message was clear. They were no longer safe. Days later, a massive fleet of black ships moved into deep space, avoiding all known routes, staying far from the path of the approaching enemy. These ships, some of the most advanced the humans had ever created, were designed for moments like this. Silent, fast, and nearly invisible to anyone who didn't know where to look. As they drifted further away from their homeworld, an eerie quiet fell over the fleet. The crew moved in silence, working efficiently as if each moment was their last. No one spoke, but everyone felt it. The fear of the unknown. Who were these people who had found them? Were they allies, or was something far darker closing in? Back on Nero Prime, a growing sense of dread filled the air. Citizens, who once lived in peace, began hearing rumors, whispers about strange ships, strange messages, but no one had answers. The Empire's leaders kept them in the dark. For now, the only truth was that the Shadow Empire was on the move. Then came the third signal. This time, the message was simple, clear, and direct. "We are coming." The transmission was short, but its impact was far-reaching. General Kale stared at the screen in disbelief. The message was unmistakable. It was not a warning, but a declaration. The unknown enemy was coming for them. The days of hiding were over. With no time to lose, the council gathered in secret. Kyle addressed them gravely. "We cannot outrun them forever. The time to hide is finished. We must decide now. Do we face them in the shadows, or do we take a stand?" Each of the council members nodded, their faces pale with fear, but also with resolve. For the first time in 200 years, humanity would face a challenge unlike any before. But this time, they would not hide. They would fight for survival. In the distance, beyond the reach of the fleet, a new, unknown enemy was preparing to strike. They were determined to find the hidden empire that had once been so powerful. No matter the cost, they would reveal the secret that humanity had kept for centuries, but humanity was ready. The universe might have found them, but they weren't afraid anymore. The fleet drifted through the darkness, the silent ships blending with the stars, their cloaking devices making them nearly invisible. It had been days since the last message, and the crew aboard the Nightfall was growing anxious. They had moved far from their home world, deeper into the unknown corners of space. But there was a feeling in the air. Something was coming. It wasn't just the signals. It was the silence. The calm before the storm. Admiral Vireo stood on the bridge, his hands clasped behind his back. His eyes scanned the vast emptiness ahead, his mind racing with questions. Who were these beings that had discovered them? How had they tracked them down so quickly? The technology they possessed was far beyond what anyone had expected, and their determination was unsettling. He wasn't used to being on the defensive. For decades, humanity had stayed hidden, content to let the galaxy believe they were gone, watching from the shadows. Now, the universe was waking up, but Vireo's resolve was clear. If they wanted to find the Shadow Empire, they would have to fight for it. "We can't hide forever," Vireo muttered, turning to his crew. "We need to know more about them. This isn't just a random encounter. They've been watching us for a long time." As he spoke, the crew worked quickly, analyzing every piece of data they could gather. The third signal, that simple declaration, was now their only clue. The message was short, but it was enough to know the enemy was coming, whether they were prepared or not. The unknown force had already made its move, and now it was up to the humans to react. In the quiet halls of the fleet, a sense of purpose began to spread. General Kale had always said that the strength of the Shadow Empire lay in its unity, in its secrecy. But now, unity would be tested in a way no one could have anticipated. The people of the Empire had always lived in peace, believing that their time would come when they would stand tall once more. But standing tall didn't mean surviving. It meant facing whatever was out there and proving that the Shadow Empire was not to be forgotten. Back on Nero Prime, the citizens were still unaware of the impending danger. Life continued as normal, though there were whispers in the streets, rumors, that something had changed. The council had kept everything under wraps, but the atmosphere was different. People felt it. They could sense that something was wrong. The once peaceful planet now seemed like a ticking clock, with the hands creeping closer to midnight. Kale knew that the longer they stayed hidden, the weaker they became. A powerful empire could not thrive in shadows forever. The galaxy might have forgotten them, but they couldn't remain invisible for much longer. The enemy that tracked them, that knew their every move, would soon make their presence known. And when they did, the empire needed to be ready, not just to survive, but to reclaim their place in the universe. Admiral Vireo stood again, his voice steady. "We will need to be smarter than we have ever been. We cannot face them in the open, not yet, but we will strike where it hurts. The universe thinks we're weak, that we are hiding. We'll prove them wrong." The silence was broken as the Nightfall sent out a series of reconnaissance ships, each one designed to gather intel without being seen. They had to know more about who was behind the signals, what technology they used, and whether they could find a way to push them back into the dark where they came from. For hours, the scout ships roamed the unknown regions of space, gathering data, scanning for traces of the enemy. Time and again, they returned with no new answers, only more questions. The universe was vast, and the unknown forces hiding out there were like shadows in the night, impossible to predict and hard to spot. Then, it happened. One of the scout ships, Echo 7, sent back a strange signal. It wasn't a transmission. They didn't even know how to read it at first. The message was encrypted with a code so complex that even their best systems couldn't crack it immediately. But something was different about it. It wasn't a simple attack or a warning. This was a challenge. The message was clear. "We know. You're out there. We will find you. We always do." And then the signal disappeared. The crew gathered around the communications console, trying to make sense of the cryptic message. It was unlike anything they had ever encountered. This was no ordinary enemy. It was as if they knew exactly how to find the Shadow Empire, no matter how well they hid. Whoever they were already steps ahead. Kyle and Vireo exchanged looks. They knew this wasn't just about survival anymore. It wasn't about hiding or waiting. The time for running was over. The universe had found them. But now, humanity had to take the first step toward reestablishing itself as a power in the galaxy. The Shadow Empire was no longer just a secret. It was ready to stand tall. The stars outside the nightfall were no longer the serene lights they once were. They had become distant, cold witnesses to a war humanity could not avoid. The fleet's journey deeper into space had become more than a mission. It was a race against time, and every moment felt like a step closer to an unknown end. Admiral. Vireo stood by the window, watching as the universe stretched out before him. His mind was heavy with the realization that the Shadow Empire's peaceful days were over. The message from Echo 7 had rattled everyone aboard, but it wasn't just the words that unsettled him. It was the silence that followed. No one had heard from the scout ship since it sent that cryptic message. Were they being tracked? Had the enemy somehow anticipated every move? Status update, Vireo said, his voice calm but with an edge of urgency. His first officer, Commander Celine, quickly moved to the console, tapping away at the controls. We've lost contact with Echo 7. The ship was on a recon mission in the Outer Rim when it transmitted the message. It should have sent back a report hours ago. The room fell quiet. Vireo's eyes narrowed. The mystery was deepening. The universe was vast, but for some reason, it felt as though they were being watched at every turn. On the surface of Nero Prime, life continued as normal. The planet, hidden behind a veil of secrecy for so long, had never felt the weight of the galaxy's gaze. But that was changing. The people of the Empire had always believed their government was watching over them, ensuring their safety. Now there was a growing undercurrent of unease. The signs were subtle at first: strange disappearances, rumors of ships that never returned, whispers in the dark corners of the cities. But now, the citizens were starting to notice it too. Something was off. The air was thick with tension, and no one could explain why. The Empire had been built in the shadows, but now that very darkness was closing in. General Kyle paced the war room, his mind racing. The time for quiet observation was gone. The unknown enemy had found them once, and it was clear they wouldn't stop until they had discovered everything about the Shadow Empire. "We cannot keep running forever," Kyle said, his voice heavy. "We have to take action. The question is, what do we do now?" The council members were silent, each one lost in their thoughts. Finally, one spoke up. "We wait for them to make the next move. They are powerful, and we can't be sure of their numbers or their tactics." But Kale shook his head. "Waiting isn't going to help us. If we continue to hide, we'll only give them more time to learn our weaknesses. We must strike back, but with caution." And so, the decision was made. They would send a small team to the Outer Rim, the very place Echo 7 had been lost, to see what they could discover. Perhaps it was a trap, perhaps not. But they had to know more. This was not just about survival anymore. It was about reclaiming control over their fate, and humanity was no stranger to adversity. It had always been resourceful, always adapted to survive. Admiral Vireo's fleet advanced slowly, moving with stealth through the dark corridors of space. The team aboard Nightfall was determined to make the first move. They needed to uncover more about this mysterious force that had already found them. Days passed in silence as the fleet traveled to the Outer Rim. Every crew member was on edge, knowing that they might be walking into a trap. Their mission was simple: gather as much information as possible about their mysterious pursuers. If they could uncover anything, any clue that would give them an edge, it could change everything. As the ships neared the coordinates where Echo 7 had last been, the tension on the bridge became unbearable. Vireo and Kale stood together, eyes fixed on the monitors as they watched the empty expanse of space. Then, suddenly, a strange distortion appeared on the edge of the fleet's scanners. It was small, almost invisible at first, but growing larger by the second. Something was there, something they hadn't seen before. The distortion shifted and pulsed, sending out a low-frequency signal. It wasn't quite like anything they had ever encountered. The distortion appeared to be alive, moving, adapting, as though it were aware of their presence. Vireo's voice broke the silence. "What is that?" "Commander, analyze it." Selene quickly moved to the console, her fingers flying over the controls. It's not a ship. It's a phenomenon, a distortion in the fabric of space. It's unlike anything we've encountered. The crew stared in awe. Whatever it was something beyond their understanding, something that shouldn't exist in their reality. The distortion began to shift, its movement almost hypnotic. It was clear now that whatever lay within it was trying to communicate. But what was it trying to say? Was this their pursuer, or was it something entirely different? Kale stepped forward. Prepare for any eventuality. We don't know what this is, but we have to find out. As the crew worked to analyze the anomaly, the universe around them seemed to hold its breath. Time slowed, and space itself seemed to warp and bend as the distortion grew closer. The crew had no idea what was waiting for them on the other side. But they knew one thing for sure. This was only the beginning. The enemy was still out there, and they were watching. The distortion grew larger, and with each passing second, the feeling of unease on the nightfall increased. The crew could feel it. A weight in the air, an invisible presence that seemed to press against their very thoughts. They had ventured into unknown space before, but this was different. This wasn't just an uncharted region of the galaxy. This was something alive. Admiral Vireo stood at the helm, his gaze fixed on the strange anomaly ahead. The screen flickered, its colors shifting like a kaleidoscope of light, as if space itself was folding and unfolding before their eyes. It was beautiful, mesmerizing even, but Vireo knew that beauty could be deceiving. "Commander Celine," he called, his voice steady but edged with caution. "How long until we can make contact?" Celine, her fingers flying over the controls, didn't look up. "It's impossible to say, Admiral. The distortion isn't responding to any of our signals. We can't even predict its movements. It's like it's thinking." Thinking? The word sent a shiver down Vireo's spine. Could it be some kind of sentient force? Something they had never encountered before? Before he could voice his next question, the distortion suddenly pulsed, and for a brief moment, the ship's systems went dark. It was as though the very fabric of reality had momentarily unraveled. The crew gasped as the ship lurched, throwing them off balance, only to snap back to normal just as quickly. The screens flickered back to life, and a deep, haunting hum resonated through the entire ship. For a moment, silence enveloped the bridge. Everyone stood frozen, staring at the flickering monitors. Then the hum changed. It wasn't random, it was a pattern, a rhythm, like a message trying to be understood. Vireo moved quickly to the communications console. "Can we decode it?" he asked, his mind racing. "We're trying," Celine replied, her voice strained. "But it's not just data. It's like the signal is part of the anomaly itself. We're not just dealing with technology, we're dealing with something organic." "Organic?" Vireo echoed, his brow furrowing. "So it's alive?" "It seems that way," Celine confirmed. "Whatever it is, it's not from our world. Not from anywhere. We've mapped." The tension on the bridge was palpable. The crew could only watch as the distortion continued to grow, now occupying nearly a quarter of their view. The once serene stars were no longer visible. All they could see was the swirling mass of shifting light and shadow. For a moment, the entire fleet felt utterly insignificant in the face of such a vast unknown force. "Admiral," Kale's voice cut through the tension, his voice low but urgent. "We need to make a decision. The fleet can't stay here much longer. If this anomaly is as unpredictable as it seems, we could be trapped." Vireo nodded slowly, his mind processing the situation. They couldn't stay here forever. The anomaly was growing, and it was clear it wasn't something they could simply outrun or avoid. They had to learn more about it, and they had to do it quickly. "Send a team in," Vireo ordered after a moment. "Prepare the shuttle. I want volunteers for an exploration mission. We need to get closer and find out what this thing really is. We need to understand its nature before it decides to act." Celine's eyes widened. "Admiral, are you sure? This could be a trap. We don't know what we're dealing with." "I know," Vireo said, his voice firm. "But we can't keep hiding forever. We need answers, and we need them now. Kyle stepped forward, his face set with determination. I'll lead the team. Vireo turned to him, meeting his gaze. Be careful, General. We don't know what we're facing. With a nod, Kale turned and motioned for his team to gather. The small group of volunteers, made up of some of the fleet's most experienced crew members, quickly assembled. They were determined, knowing the risks but also knowing that the fate of their empire could depend on what they discovered. As they prepared to board the shuttle, the crew aboard the Nightfall watched, every eye trained on the approaching anomaly. There was no turning back now. They had come too far to stop. It was as if the universe itself was holding its breath, waiting for them to make the next move. The shuttle detached from the ship, moving cautiously toward the swirling mass of light and shadow. Every second felt like an eternity. The crew could only watch, helpless as the shuttle moved deeper into the unknown. Their fate, and the fate of the Shadow Empire, now rested on the shoulders of the brave souls embarking on this perilous journey. Inside the shuttle, General Kale and his team were silent, each one lost in their thoughts. No one knew what awaited them, but all understood the importance of the mission. They were venturing into the heart of the unknown, and they would need to face whatever lay there without hesitation. Then, just as they neared the center of the anomaly, a voice crackled through their comms. Admiral, Celine's voice came through, tense with urgency. The anomaly, it's reacting to the shuttle, it's changing. Vireo's heart raced. What do you mean, changing? The response came, but it was barely audible, as though something was blocking the signal. It's not just light. It's alive. Moving. Towards you. The connection cut out, leaving nothing but silence. And then, all at once, the shuttle's instruments began to malfunction. The crew inside was shaken, as the ship's systems flickered and sputtered. They had no idea what they were about to face, but one thing was certain. This was a discovery that would change everything. The universe had never been more mysterious, and humanity was about to come face to face with an answer to a question they didn't even know they were asking. The shuttle drifted into the heart of the anomaly, its systems now sputtering uncontrollably. Inside, General Kale and his team were tense, gripping their seats as the instruments flashed erratically, unable to provide any clear readings. The once silent void had become an overwhelming force, a presence that seemed to fill the very air around them. Stay focused. Kale's voice echoed through the comms, calm yet determined. We don't know what we're dealing with, but we need to stay sharp. His words were barely heard over the rising hum that now filled the shuttle. It was as though the anomaly itself was alive, growing, adapting, responding to their presence. The walls of the shuttle seemed to pulse with energy, the soft glow of the lights flickering in time with the beats of the strange hum. The team had always been prepared for danger, but nothing could have prepared them for this. As they ventured deeper, a strange sensation washed over them, like a weight pressing down from all directions, warping the very fabric of reality around them. It was as though the universe itself was bending and stretching, and they were caught in the middle of it all. Time seemed to slow, or perhaps it was speeding up. The crew could no longer tell. Then, without warning, the shuttle's viewport began to distort. The stars outside twisted and warped into unfamiliar shapes, as though the fabric of space itself was unraveling. The familiar blackness of space seemed to fade, replaced by an endless sea of swirling colors, each hue more intense than the last. It was beautiful, but it was also terrifying. Admiral, Kale's voice crackled over the comms, his tone filled with a mixture of awe and fear. You need to see this. Suddenly the shuttle lurched violently, sending everyone aboard into a momentary disarray. Kyle quickly regained control, his hands steady as he corrected their course. Through the viewport, the crew saw something that made their hearts stop. A massive shape, something that defied logic, loomed in the distance. It wasn't a ship, at least not in the traditional sense. It was as if the anomaly itself had taken form. The swirling, shifting colors coalesced into an enormous organic structure, pulsing with a rhythm that seemed to mirror their own heartbeat. It was both alien and familiar, as if it had always been there, waiting, watching. Kale's eyes widened. What in the stars is that? I don't know, Selene replied, her voice tense. But whatever it is, it's not just a phenomenon, it's alive. It's like it's drawing us in. The shuttle's sensors were now completely useless. Nothing worked. Nothing but the hum that filled the air and the growing pull of the anomaly. It was as though they were becoming part of it, drawn toward it with an unstoppable force. The team exchanged glances, each of them trying to comprehend what they were seeing. Prepare for anything, Kale said, his voice grim. We don't know what's waiting for us, but we have to find out. We need answers. The shuttle continued its slow, inevitable approach toward the massive entity. The colors outside had shifted again, now swirling with patterns that seemed to pulse with life, almost as if they were trying to communicate. Each twist and turn of the light created new shapes, images that appeared for an instant before vanishing into the void. Suddenly, a voice echoed through the shuttle, though no one could say where it had come from. It wasn't on the comms. It wasn't from any of the crew. It was something different. Humanity has arrived. The words sent a chill through the crew. They looked at one another in stunned silence. The voice was soft, yet it carried a weight of ancient knowledge, as though it had spoken across the ages. Who are you? Kyle called out, his voice steady but filled with uncertainty. The voice did not answer immediately, but the entity, if that's what it was, seemed to pulse in response. The space around them shimmered, and for a brief moment, the entire shuttle seemed to disappear, swallowed by the vastness of the entity itself. Time felt distorted once again. Minutes stretched into hours, or perhaps it was hours that passed like seconds. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the sensation stopped. The shuttle's systems flickered back to life, and the crew found themselves floating in an entirely new place. The entity had released its hold on them, and they were now in a vast, empty space, a space unlike any they had ever seen. The massive form of the anomaly loomed just beyond them, but now, it seemed, quieter. Its presence was no longer overwhelming, but it still carried an aura of undeniable power. It was as if the very nature of reality had shifted. Something had changed. I don't understand, Selene whispered, her voice barely audible. Where are we? Before Kale could answer, the voice spoke again, clearer this time, echoing in their minds as though it had bypassed their ears altogether. Humanity has found us. But do you understand what you have awakened? The crew's hearts raced as they processed the meaning of those words. Whatever this force was, it knew them, it knew what they were, and it was speaking directly to them. Kyle's mind raced. What had they awakened? What was this force that seemed to be tied to the very fabric of existence? Was it a warning or an invitation? They were at the crossroads of something much larger than themselves, something that might change the fate of humanity forever. But were they ready for it? Could they even comprehend what they were about to uncover? As they waited for the next response, the universe around them seemed to hold its breath.